My name is Raiden Ombi and I am doing part 2 of chapter 38. The second half begins with the Soviet Union going against Hungary. Emre Nagy, the Hungarian president, would leave the Warsaw Pact and Jonas Gadar, a Soviet leader, would execute him. In 1968, Alexander Dubek would support the group Prague Spring that would spread liberal communism. This would scare the Soviet Union and they would end up having a conflict with Lynch-Brezhnev, creating the Brezhnev Doctrine to justify their actions, which would give them the right to invade when threatened. Now moving to China, after World War II, they would continue their civil war with the communists winning and pushing back the nationalists. Mao Zedong, the Chinese communist leader, would seek to be like Soviet socialism. In 1955, China would have their 5-year plan that would speed up economic development and end up helping the peasants by giving them land from the wealthy. There were also policies that gave women equal rights. There would be problems with the Soviet-Chinese alliances, and they would compete to see whoever would have a bigger impact and influence in Africa and Asia. The US and Soviet Union would have the cooperations like health and research centers. But in 1972, they would end their strategic arms limitations talk. However, in 1981, the US would sell weapons to China. Now, in Vietnam, they would have their civil war between the North and South. The US would support the South, but it would only go to a stalemate. The US President Richard Nixon would extend wartime against the North and would shoot bombs in Cambodia, but would ultimately fail and the South would end up losing the war. In Afghanistan, the Soviet Union would try to form and help Afghanistan, but would end up losing to the Afghan Mujahideen and would have a major setback. Wait, hearing right now from Britain, a new form of music is forming. Rock and roll. There would be singers like Elvis Presley and bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones that would influence the youth. Sadly, Nixon's actions of the unauthorized bombing in Cambodia would send him out of the White House. But luckily, Ronald Reagan came in town and would make the Strategic Defense Initiative, but would also be known as, which would defend the US with high-level tech against nuclear weapons. In Europe, the eastern and central countries would gain independence, and in 1991, the Soviet Union would collapse. In 1990, Czechoslovakia would have a Velvet Revolution, which would kick out all communists. But in 1993, there would be the Velvet Divorce, with Czechoslovakia splitting into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. In the Soviet Union, Boris and Yeltsin would become president and would try to get independence and crush the Soviet communists. By the end of the Cold War and all the conflicts, the world will enter a new era.